desperately need to get together and let our voices be heard.
This is Buffalo What's Next. I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
I'm Dave Debo.
And I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
After May 14th, how can we afford not to talk about race?
About education, about segregation, about humanity.
Since the dawn of this nation, racial violence has existed.
The way we have designed our society has a big hand in what occurred in that Tops Market.
The suburban area, everywhere, we must work and teach our children.
We need to make sure that we put more funding in our programs that help prevent gun violence and more money into art.
If we're going to have some real healing, we've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truths.
On today's program, we're talking with Marvin Askew. He's the executive director of the Buffalo City Ballet. Hi, Marvin.
Hi, how are you?
Great, and thanks for coming in and joining us. There's a lot of elements to this that are interesting. I want to get into the City Ballet and what you guys are doing and who you teach, but I want to talk just a little bit about your personal story to start things off here. Take us back to a teenage Marvin Askew and how he ended up getting into ballet.
Teenage Marvin Askew. Wow. I started dancing at Clinton Junior High School at that time. Well, now it's called Buffalo Performing Arts, but Clinton Junior High. I was a 13, 14-year-old kid that had no rhythm whatsoever.
Okay, wow.
No, that's the honest truth.
Okay.
Wanted to play basketball. We had a couple of guys that were, at that time were superstar, and I wanted to be like them. And I was told, I couldn't dribble very well, I couldn't shoot very well, and so I was told, well, if you take dance, it'll help you out with your footwork.
Okay.
And then I had people who was telling me, yeah, just like the football player, like Lynn Swan, from Pittsburgh Ballet, and he was taking secret ballet lessons and helping with his athletic ability, with the team. So I figured, okay, I'm going to do this, So me and 14 other boys, from the community went there, and we were taking class, and then we got in there and
you went to Buffalo City Ballet.
No, at this time
this is at school.
It wasn't Buffalo. Yeah,
okay.
It was just at the school, but the instructor, who was Carl Singletary, at that time was developing, the Buffalo Inner City Ballet.
I gotcha.
And so he would bring, his young female dancers, to the school with him, as where they would. He would use them as example, to demonstrate what the movement is, and then we would have to follow them, And then of course, we were like, wow, these beautiful young, black girls, of course, all 14 of us, like fighting over, I'm gonna get to meet that one,
Sure.
And so, we would get into the stretch class, and just being on the floor working out with the young ladies, and I started realizing that this is something that I can do. And so as the time went on, I became very skilled in terms of partnering and learning how to lift the girls, how to turn them the proper way, how to hold them on balance.
Did you have any interest in ballet before this?
No, none whatsoever.
And probably most of your friends didn't either.
No.
Okay.
But like I said, we would get in there, and so the instructor would tell us, just think of you got a basketball in your hand, and you switching from side to side, learning how to work the balance of the ball. Well, you have to do the same thing with the girl.
Wow.
So we put our hands, between the girl waist. So if it's too far right, you got to pull her left, So realize, oh, okay, it's just, the same mechanics,
Okay. All right. Interesting.
And, so we, started doing that, and I became very skillful in that. So whenever I got a chance to partner up with a girl, it was easy. I would get in there and start spinning her and kept her on her center, and and so every time a production or something like that would come up, I had the young ladies coming to me. Oh, they'll stand next to me because they wanted me to be their partner because they realized that
you could do it.
Mm-hmm. And so that's when I realized, okay, I can do this. And after a while, I was getting invites from various schools that were willing to have me come in to dance with the girl, and they would pay me $500 to $1,000, for a weekend to perform. And I realized, oh, I can make some money at this,
Nice.
instead of me being at the local supermarket, carrying somebody's bag of grocery for a few bucks.
Right. And so, just to take us back then, so we're talking about in the 70s in Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
What was life like for a teenager who was growing up in the city of Buffalo?
It was rough. I grew up in Tauber Mall at that time. That's on Jefferson and Clinton. And there was a lot of gang violence, not like you see today.
Okay.
But we had them too, where that, young, black males running around with guns and stuff like that. It was the threat of shooting you,
Mm-hmm.
but no one ever really pulled the trigger.
Gotcha.
So compared to now, as far as gun violence, you had young gang members. If they would fire the gun, most likely they were firing up in the air, to scare you.
Right.
But even at that time, the thought, so I made a pledge to myself, if I ever have the opportunity to leave that situation, I'm going to, And so through dance was the best way, And I, after graduating from high school, I won several scholarships to American Ballet Theater and New York City Ballet, and took those opportunities to go to New York and study, even further, and being in same room, like in the same classroom with superstars like Mikhail Baryshnikov, and you see Rudolf Nureyev or, Fernando Bujonas, you were just like, wow, I want to be like that, So then I start doubling my class, so I was taking anywhere between 2 to 3 classes a day, 6 days a week, just to get to close to that level,
How many black men were training to dance back then?
Not many. And if you were black and you were in dance, you were often pushed to go to Dance Theater of Harlem.
Oh, okay.
At that time in the 70s with either Dance Theater of Harlem or Alvin Ailey. And those are the two major black dance company out of New York. And so if you were black, you either went to one of those two,
Right.
But because of my style of training, the Russian training, and I had all these Russian instructors, and so I felt that I could compete with most white dancers in terms of white companies. So I didn't want to be targeted, just because you were a black dancer, you had to go there.
Sure.
Sure. So, which I did audition for Dance of Harlem, and the director, Arthur Mitchell, told me basically, I have to retrain you, and I was like, at that time I didn't understand exactly what he meant by retraining me, but I think he meant retraining me for that particular style that he wanted me to perform with that company. And I felt, well, my training was better than that style of dance, so I'm going to take my chance with one of the major white companies. So from that Friday, audition with Dancer Hall, I went to Pittsburgh and auditioned that Monday and got the job there. And so then I knew, and felt comfortable where I was in terms of, my style of training.
So you spent a lot of time as a professional, full-time ballet dancer in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
So obviously,
I was the first black member of Pittsburgh Ballet.
Wow.
And even that was rough, because what I realized was that, even though you were good, you weren't going to get the opportunity. Now, I did get one good opportunity where we were doing the Elvin Ailey River, and the lead dancer, principal dancer, had a foot injury. And so they didn't know what to do. So all the dancers were like, oh, wow, because you needed somebody who was a jumper and a turner. and I had possessed both of those skills. So a lot of the dancers were like, well, let Marvin do it, and so the director of the company at that point in time, Pat Wild, go, no, because the whole thing turns of being black, so the person who came in to set the production just kind of looked around the room and said, okay, this is what I need. Who can do this? So myself and about 3 other guys, took the part, and at the end, she goes, I want him to do it. So I got to do the lead,
Nice.
and and got very good reviews in the paper, and it wasn't until and I realized, in terms of the director, she wasn't quite happy with it, but she accepted it, but that's all that counts.
So you have a nice career going there, but you're commuting. You're spending your weekdays, and weeknights in Pittsburgh, but your family's back here in Buffalo.
Yeah, and I would drive home every weekend. So unless they're a week of production, I would drive home every weekend. Leave right after Friday night rehearsal, back in Buffalo within 4 hours. And then I would get up early that Monday morning, drive back, get back, in time of, the first class and rehearsal, by 10 o'clock.
Wow.
And I did that for a couple of years, and it was rough.
Yeah. You had to make a personal, professional decision then.
Yeah, I had 2. Actually, at that time, I only had 1 son. So I had to make a decision, And so I felt, well, I need to come back home, help raise him, And during that time period, I got received another contract from Missouri Ballet, and they were willing to hire me as a principal dancer. And then my wife, we realized, okay, she's pregnant again.
Wow. Wow.
So I had to make a choice, take that contract or family. So I decided family was over the contract.
You stayed here in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when I took over the school.
Yeah, Buffalo City Ballet. So what about the Buffalo City Ballet? How many kids? Tell me about the kids that are there.
We when I first took over the school, it was a 60-40 ratio, 60 white, 40 black, Over the years, that has reversed. Now it's 90% black, 10% white.
90% black from the city of Buffalo?
From the city of Buffalo.
Wow.
And so the thing that I'm always concerned is giving young black girls an opportunity, to at least learn, how to learn about classical ballet, and what it takes to become a ballerina, and it's rough, it's rough. Any African-American dancer, in terms of dance, is going to have a hard life in terms of dance, unless you have someone that's going to take you under your wing, and even if not just black dance, but even if you're white,
Okay.
The most successful dancer always have someone that is backing them financially, because you can't really live off your basic salary. You need someone that's going to get you to and from all audition classes, pay for your accommodation up until you become either a soloist or a principal dancer. But even I see with even a lot of core member dancers, they're from very wealthy families who's paying their rent still and paying, or they're contributing to the ballet companies, and in return, those ballet companies keep them on payroll.
Okay.
Because of the contribution they're getting from those families.
Wow.
So that's something that happens quite frequently.
So that's not generally happening to your students then, obviously, right?
No.
Yeah.
But what I provide for them is, pretty much tuition free, so they can come and take class, basically at no cost at all. What little fee that I may, charge, is maybe for like point shoes, to to cover those costs, or keeping costume clean, or having, to provide new costumes, or,
Right.
But what they learn, is basically, how to work together, building up the self-esteem that, yes, I can do this. We don't turn away. Excuse me. Even if it's a child that has a weight problem, we don't turn them away, because we want to build, even their self-esteem up to feel that I can do this too, And
do you see that? Do you see that then out of these young women that are like that?
Yeah.
You see that they're getting there's a change in them. Like you said, maybe if there's a weight problem involved.
Yeah. Even I have a few come in, and we go and put them in a tutu, and we go, okay, that tutu is not going to close, because. So we have to design something, what we call an insert, in the back of the panels that widen out so that child can fit into that costume, So you have to be creative,
right?
Where that a lot of schools not going to do that,
Gotcha.
Because
you find a way.
If you don't fit the costume, if you don't fit that mold of what a dancer should look like, they're not even going to look at you or consider you.
Wow.
So
they're getting opportunities through your school.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Marvin Askew is our guest this morning. He is the executive director of the Buffalo City Ballet. You got into it there a little bit about self-esteem, but and we cannot kind of guess at the physical benefits of being able to dance and stretch and the flexibility. But what about the art of it? How can you describe that and what a student would get from understanding how to perform ballet?
Well, what you get is, for example, ballet is a syllabus, so every step has a name, and, so you have to learn how to execute that step, And so what I try to drive into each child is that, if you know the basic and understand the syllabus, everything else will work itself out, So, and I'll use this, I often, start off with the first thing they walk in the classroom is learning what a plie is, And, so I would tell them, plies mean bending of the knee. Now, you don't have to be a dancer to understand. Everyone is, through their life is doing what we call a plie. You're going upstairs, downstairs,
Okay.
you're bending your knees. You're walking, you're bending your knees.
Right.
So it's just your placement. So you have 5 basic positions that you have to learn, and you learn those 5 basic positions. And within, if you take the first position, it's basically, heel to heel with your toes expanding outward from your body. You stand straight up, bend your knees. Try to bend your knees, but don't take your heels off the floor. Now you're in a half plie. Now, take your heels off the floor and go all the way down. You're in a full plie. So it's getting them to understand that, and what every movement means. Tendus, means to stretch. So you're stretching your legs from your hip bone all the way down to your toe without bending your knees. And when kids learn all, how to execute those steps, and I go through it with them every day. I see them, and I test them on that, And before we even start actually doing movement, what does this mean, And they got to tell me right off,
You seem like such a nice, easygoing guy. I have this hard time picturing you being this demanding ballet instructor. Well, how would you describe your instruction?
Well, I'm more of a father figure.
Okay.
With the kids, because they call me Mr. Marvin.
All right.
Over the years, it's always Mr. Marvin, Mr. Marvin, Mr. Marvin. And but and sometimes I have this look. I would go in and I would look at him like a father, like, what are you doing? Just give him that look like, No. And then they'll look at me like, I'm sorry. And then they'll throw out what it really means, and say, okay, I thought you knew what that step means. Why are you doing this? So that's the way I kind of operate.
Sure. Sure.
And
was that how your teachers were?
No, I know I had these little old Russian teachers that look at me in the eye and go, "You're never going to be anything." And so I would look back and I'm like, yeah, okay, I would prove you wrong. But that's that's over the years how, back in the 60s and 70s, they were just pure mean teachers.
Wow.
And their job was, they walk in the classroom was, okay, what young lady I'm going to make cry today?
Wow.
And that's the way they operate.
Wow.
So you always have some ballerina cry, and as a guy, we used to go in the class and go, all right, who's going to be today? Take bets. But that's the way, but, over the years, things have changed. You can't be that way with kids.
Right.
I often say this is a sue nation. Everybody ready to sue you, if, cruelty, you're being mean,
right.
So I try to find, I don't know if maybe I mellowed out over the years, after having kids and, and now grandkids, and, realize, that, you got to find a way to reach them without being mean,
Right.
So I would go into the classroom and, I get my point across to the kids, but then at the time I make it very enjoyable for them to be in the classroom, And I get down on the floor and I act sometimes just as silly as they do, but then I got to reel them back in. Okay, let's get serious now. But they're ready to run up to you and hug, and especially now after the pandemic, I'm like, no,
right,
and being older, and so I try not to get too close, and and then as a male teacher now, with all the things that's going on in the country, it used to be a time where you're in the classroom and you could touch the student, you grab the legs and put your legs up and everything. You can't do that now.
Gotcha.
Whenever I'm instructing, I'd never shut the doors. Parents can come in and see exactly how I'm working with the kids. I'm not screaming at them. I make it very joyful for them, to be there. And I don't touch, and I used to have this intimidating stick that I used to thump on the floor, but I don't even use that.
You moved on from that?
Yeah.
Well, how many boys are you typically teaching?
Well, right now I have 2 boys.
Okay.
Up until the pandemic hit, I had about 5 boys that I was working with, and we went for almost 2 years of no classes, of shutting down, and most of the kids have gained weight, or the boys are older now and are kind of into different things, and and now they don't want to do it because now they fell behind. Well, like pretty much all the kids, and I think that not just our school, but I realize in terms of a lot of other schools, dance schools in the area, lost a lot of students.
Sure.
Because of the pandemic, and kids that were doing very well, sat out almost 2 years. And that's the one thing about dance, you can't sit 2 years out.
Right.
There's just no way you can come back and,
And you said you were taking 2 or 3 classes a day when you were in New York City.
Right,
so,
right.
What you have to do if you're going to stay with it.
Right.
What about, all right, so I have a son in the city of Buffalo, and he's looking for something I want my son to have an activity to do. And I'm thinking, probably not a lot of fathers are thinking, ballet. What are you telling them? What are you telling those parents?
Well, like I have some fathers that came in and, and asked, but they're not sure because it's still that stigma that you have to, break, in terms of when it comes down, dancing doesn't make you gay. I went through that for many years, where that, like I said, I started with 14 boys,
right.
14 of us. And we all started dropping out one by one because they were thinking, well, if I share, people may think I ain't, gay and, and I realized, dancing doesn't do that to you. Either you're born that way or, I have a brother that danced. He was gay, and I think that kind of helped me understand the whole thing. And so I recall even before I got married, I had girlfriends that I was dating, and then also they just dropped out of the picture, and I couldn't understand why. I come back home, and they didn't want to see me anymore. Well, they thought I was gay. So years later after I get married, they're asking me, well, I thought you were gay. That's the reason why, I broke it off. I was like, well, why do you think that? I mean, wouldn't it be better you just ask me?
Right. Right.
But,
but that's still something that you deal with, though.
That's something I still, but personally.
I'm saying, I'm you now. This is you on the shoes on the other foot, so to speak.
Right.
You now have to explain this to others.
To like fathers, who that want their sons to take dance, but then they're like, I'm not sure. In the building that we're in now, we have a boxing club on the 3rd floor. And some of the boys, they come down with the interest, like, I want to try, but then, they're in question, that if I come down here and take class, then everybody else is upstairs going to think something different,
okay,
So, and I just say to them, well, just think about it, if you're comfortable in terms of who you are, then you shouldn't have no problem with that,
Right.
And that's the best thing you can do, but it's still that same old problem with fathers, and once the boys get, between, it's okay for them to take dance, between 3 and roughly about 9 or 10, but then once they get over 10, the fathers no longer, they pull them out.
Is that right?
Yeah.
We're coming down to our final moments here, but I do want to talk about a couple of things. First of all, your theater, it's on Leroy.
307 Leroy.
Right here in Buffalo. You just moved over there. How did the transition go for you?
It was rough.
Yeah.
We were, like I said, we were in the Tri-Main. One of the reasons why we moved from the Tri-Main was they brought in another ballet school in the building. And we were at odds with each other. We were basically doing the same old thing. People were getting confused, and I understand, the owner, I mean, it's business with him in terms of rent, and, so with all the problem that was going on, I said, well, I think it's time for us to move, and every time I would try to come up with a new way of doing things, it got botched, and some, because of being in the building. So we went into 307 Leroy. That was basically, the building was really in bad condition, So the owners came in and did, some basic repairs and stuff like that. Once we moved in, the pandemic hit, and so I was unemployed, and all of my unemployment check went into fixing up parts, of the building, interior, in terms of the studio, laying out the bars, the mirrors, and on the 2nd floor, I put in a small theater we call the Inbox Theater, fully equipped with I built the stage personally, put the lights up, sound system, next door it has a cafe, so during intermission, where patrons can go and have coffee or, snacks, and then the kids have a game room, so whenever they're waiting on parents or they have free time, they can go up in the game room and play. And then we were able to convert the main studio to small, in terms of having small events, for something like Claire Tea Party, which is coming up on December 4th. We can rent the hall out to for like small wedding reception and things like that.
Right.
So it gave us more opportunity to expand, beyond just teaching the dance, classes to kids. Now we can rent the little theater, to young dancers who don't have a home to perform, or a lot of kids are into poetry, and so we have a place where if you're just starting, you could come in for very few bucks, $100, $200, to rent the space for a week. It's available.
And when you said, when you're waiting on parents, you told me the story before, and I hope you don't mind sharing it with our listeners. But on May 14th of this year, you were at school waiting on parents, and you very likely would have been going to Tops.
Right. And because of those parents were late picking up, with like one or two parents were late picking up their child, I would probably have been at that store on that day,
At that time.
Yeah. And it was just, I guess, luck was on my side, to be delayed. And I got in the car and heard about it because I was on my way to that top. And when I heard, I said, okay, well, I guess I'm heading straight home from there,
Right.
So.
And you live in the neighborhood?
I lived in the neighborhood for over 25 years, and it's just a block away from, that Tops Market.
How are things in the neighborhood right now?
I still think people are feeling the pain, people are still angry, I do believe, things will get better. I feel very sure of that. But for me, whenever I go down, you still have that in the back of your head every time you enter the store.
Right.
Because I still, have that feeling when I go there. Even though they upped security, but you still just have that that feeling when you walk in.
Yeah. You guys are going to have your Nutcracker performances at the theater on Leroy Avenue, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now it's not our standard production. Our standard production we usually do at Buffalo Academy for Visual Performing Arts. So like I said, we built a box theater, so it's a scaled down version. So
Like 16 by 16, right? Is that right?
16 by 19.
16 by 19. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
And so we had scaled down the sets to that. Now, the only difference is that when you're in a full theater, you don't get to see all the stuff that happens behind the theater. The changing of the sets and the scenery, the lights, and Well, here you get to feel all that and see all that.
Wow.
So you get to see how the show is actually put together without the curtain closing.
Sure.
And I found people really enjoy that, because they never, saw all the things that goes on in between, So it's a nice little intimate experience, for families.
And that's coming up in December, right?
We're doing it 2 weekends because we only could see max about 30 people per show.
So a very intimate gathering, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's December 10th and 11th.
Right.
So 2 shows on Saturday, 1 show on Sunday, and then the following weekend, the 17th and 18th.
Nice. And open to the public. Anybody wants to come?
Anybody, yep.
Can come on and check it out.
Yes.
What will they see? What give your sales pitch? And what makes it a special moment?
Well, what makes it a special moment, like I said, is to come in and feel the. It has a nice feeling in terms of Christmas, because, and especially, the one scene, everybody loved it, the snow scene, the lighting effects and with the snow just floating down and, and I think they get more fun out of the kids' reaction than because the kids are looking up. They're supposed to be on stage performing, but they're up looking at the snow falling down, and it's like, wow, whoa, and so the parents are laughing, like, because they get a real kick out of it,
Sure.
So it's a nice, like I said, intimate, enjoyable scene, and so I say, come out and experience that with us.
See what it's all about.
Yeah.
So, and somebody wanted more information, a website to go to?
They can go to the website, which is buffalocityballet.org.
Okay.
Or they could just call 716-833-1243.
All right. Very good. And Marvin Askew is the executive director of Buffalo City Ballet. Thanks very much for joining us on Buffalo What's Next.
Thanks for having me.
Listen to Buffalo What's Next weekday mornings at 10 a.m. on WBFO or stream it on WBFO.org. Use the Talk to Us feature on the WBFO app to leave your questions and comments.
Do you absolutely love Masterpiece, Antiques Roadshow, PBS NewsHour, great performances, and other amazing shows on WNED PBS, but you're not always in front of your TV when they're on? Don't miss them. You can stream the channel live wherever you are in Western New York by visiting WNED.org/live or use the WNED PBS app.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter at WBFO or email us at news@WBFO.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And this is Dave Debo. For the balance of the program today, we're going to be talking a little bit about history, a little bit about preservation, a little bit about economic development. And that's the part where I think for this particular program, the rubber hits the road, as it were. We talk about what happened to the East Side. We talk about what happened to Jefferson Avenue. But has anyone really studied it? Has anyone ever looked at some of the trends? Granted, the Kensington had a role when that neighborhood was split. Granted, redlining had a role when that neighborhood was split. But there are some other factors here that people can look at. And one of the people is someone who's here with us today. Tim Tielman is here from the Campaign for Greater Buffalo History, Architecture, and Culture, longtime preservationist. He's got degrees in urban geography and history, and he's someone who has studied this sort of stuff for quite some time. Tim, thanks very much for coming on in.
Oh, thanks for calling us, Dave.
You recently did a forum, I guess we can call it, on the East Side with Veronica Hemphill-Nichols from the Fruit Belt, where you kind of traced the history, where you looked at the idea of what has happened to Jefferson Avenue. Jefferson Avenue today is not the Jefferson Avenue we saw back in 1970 even. Everyone talks about supermarkets. Before the Tops, there was Figmo's. Before Figmo's, the Bellamy family had a supermarket. Take me back once upon a time, Tim, to when Jefferson was thriving. When was that?
Well, primarily this area of Jefferson that we're talking about and that Veronica Hemphill-Nichols and I discussed in our presentation in early December was the stretch of Jefferson from basically Southampton, near where War Memorial Stadium was, to West Ferry Street. And that was really the core of what became the black neighborhood. In fact, I had a black work colleague when I worked in Albrecht's downtown decades ago, who described Jefferson to me literally as, well, it's the black Main Street. And chock-a-block with businesses.
It was a commercial district,
yes,
equivalent to Hurdle or Elmwood today.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, and so when we look at the type of development, it wasn't the first rank, which was downtown Buffalo, but it was the neighborhood service. So you had a dense population, people living in doubles. You had maybe 18,000 people in that immediate neighborhood, and they needed someplace to go for a pair of shoes, get their hair cut, get groceries, get a goldfish or whatever, and that could all be done in a couple block stretch of Jefferson Avenue.
And that lasted till when?
That lasted till probably 1970 or so, when we begin to see massive clearances of buildings. And, you know, I did, because of the shooting that occurred in May, and all the talk about, well, yeah, I was aware, of course, of the effort to lure tops into the neighborhood, and that it was the place where so many people got their food. And I thought, but why a big supermarket? What happened to all the mom and pops?
Mm-hmm.
And so I did some research on it, and the figures, of course, were simply astounding.
The idea of the shop store is no more, and I don't say that to be quaint. The rhyme just came out. The idea that you'd have buildings with retail on the bottom and apartments above, contributing to both the commercial viability and some of the housing density.
Yes, and you know, Dave,
how many of those buildings came down, and why?
Hundreds.
Why?
And well, there were a lot of reasons. But if we go back, this didn't happen overnight. Something like the Kensington Expressway or an urban renewal program, they're not concocted and implemented within a span of 1 or 2 years. These are decades. So it had to do with thinking about cities and what are we going to do with cars going back to the 1920s. An amazing thing that we often use in our historic preservation research are a set of aerial photographs from 1927. The earliest aerial photographs of Erie County, they were made for a road Erie County highway project. Where are we going to build highways for the urban future? And so those photographs were done. They show Jefferson Avenue. They show Genesee Street. They show the east side densely built up with innumerable mom and pop businesses that are feeding off this pedestrian stream that's walking up and down Genesee, walking up and down Jefferson or Broadway, getting off streetcars, getting off buses at corners, Jefferson and Utica, and that's where you get this locus of businesses. So a mom and pop could start a business in a relatively cheap container, a space that had retail up above and
or housing above, you mean?
Housing up above, retail
Sure.
down below, and a predictable stream of people going about their business, doing the daily round. And it was great for all walks of life. Small children could be sent on missions to get the bread and the milk without fear, and it's a block up the street. It's around the corner. And you could get whatever you needed for your day-to-day existence. Sure, special occasions, you would have to go to a department store downtown, but you could go to Grant's on Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
You could buy an engagement ring on Jefferson.
And was the primacy of the car, the rising desire to drive, what kind of started the decline?
You know, Dave, that's correct, and it's a push-pull.
More than just the Kensington, but the idea that you didn't need the walkable neighborhoods anymore, so therefore people didn't necessarily go to the store right around the corner with the housing
That's
above.
how the planners thought. So when the car was coming, all the planning was done for cars. For example, I showed a series of photographs. This is amazing. Did you know that until about 1900, 1910, when it snowed, people cleared the sidewalks? Because that's how people got around.
Yeah.
They sledded.
Oh, because they had to, because they were walking still.
Right. And they sledded in the streets. And New York City, Boston, you can see pictures of snowplows on sidewalks dumping it into the street. That changed with cars, and we don't even think about it. It's reflexive. The snowplow clears the street. Where do they dump it? On the sidewalks.
Right.
That makes it hard to walk, and it privileges people in cars, whereas young people old people, people who can't walk, they have a hard time. That hurts walkable businesses.
Tim Tielman is with us from the Campaign for Greater Buffalo History, Architecture, and Culture. He's recently pulled together a presentation looking at what happened, lost Jefferson, what happened on Jefferson Avenue. A lot of the analysis we've heard before certainly looks at the Kensington, certainly looks at race riots of the 60s, but your perspective is that it's really more than that. It's the car and what else?
Yeah. So the car is privileged. You are building the Kensington, and the urban renewal projects, particularly on the Lower East Side and the Lower West Side, they are forcing at a stroke 5,000-6,000 people to find new housing. At the same time,
because houses and places of residence were being torn down.
This is what happened after the war. You have FHA loans, cheap loans for new housing, not existing, new. Where could new housing be built? On greenfield sites,
or on the site of old housing that you tear down.
Yes, that are being connected by these new highways. So there's a devaluing of existing buildings in favor of new buildings. Only certain people could get these new buildings. And then there was massive demolition of older buildings in the Ellicott District, a push northward into the Fruit Belt and Cold Springs. And then you had some panicked reactions on the part of the city, the state, private owners, unscrupulous real estate people, that led to some massive housing abandonment and demolitions.
When you say panic, are you talking about the white flight? Are you talking about a racial issue? What specifically triggered the panic?
Well, let me say that you're not going to see, for example, printed evidence of screaming panic. What you're going to see is, you're going to see, whoa, all of a sudden there's a massive abandonment, people moving out. There's fires, things like that. And then you look at the census data, which I did. 1970, you had experienced a 21% drop in population from 1960, and then to 1980, a 50% drop in population in Cold Springs. That's abandonment of housing stock. And demolition of housing stock. And you confirm that with the analysis of aerial photographs. You see in 1950, solidly built up houses, and suddenly you go to 1990, and it's Little House on the Prairie. So that is not a useful neighborhood for people to live in. So it's a downward spiral because it's difficult to live there. For example, if you don't have a car, you can't send someone down for a loaf of bread or a quart of milk. So people want to live in useful neighborhoods where their lives are easier. So life becomes hard when you demolish the very stuff that would contain residences or shops. And that's what happened on Jefferson.
So is the solution then to make sure that every development anywhere, east side, west side, wherever, is mixed use with residential and commercial?
There's no question. And I would go further. I would say it's incumbent upon the state and the city and the federal government to build this type of building, this shop house, and don't do it as a public-private development. No, we need public money to replace the building stock that was taken, and we need low rents to enable mom and pop businesses to form, because that's the glue, that's the foundation for neighborhood revitalization.
Let me push back against that a little bit. I've heard people in the neighborhood say nothing will improve this neighborhood without neighborhood ownership. The classic example is the African Heritage Food Co-op. They don't want another supermarket. They want something locally owned where they can then invest the profits, have some viability. If you're taking and plunking in a huge amount of federal or state housing projects, you still don't have the flow of money to the community, do you?
Well, Dave, I think part of it is perception of what is a federal or state housing project. This would be paid for by federal and state money, but you're getting in form the shop house that you tore down in the 1970s. So I would say, no, I don't want a 11-story high building like Ellicott Mall. What I want is small scale buildings such as we had, so a local mom and pop neighborhood based can in fact operate a business. Right now, the method to revitalize these neighborhoods is to get a big corporation that specializes in putting big buildings up, and then having a automobile-based little plaza or something. That does not work. That does not allow small businesses and small business people to thrive.
And as proof, you could probably point to, again, Elmwood or Hurdle or Williamsville or East Aurora.
Yeah, you know what, Dave, and I don't think it's a secret. If you have a black-owned venture, a retail venture, they're going to go where the customer base is. So you find a lot of black businesses going to Elmwood or going to Hurdle because that's where the pedestrian flow is. That's where the population density is. So it is it's interaction of retail space and population base. So you need both, and the only way that Cold Springs or Broadway or Sycamore or Genesee is going to be successful is if we rebuild the conditions that existed prior to destroying so many houses with the Kensington or undermining our public transportation. So if we focus on restoration of the pedestrian stream, other things will come.
And you think that is community sustainable, that there's the phrase that nothing about us without us is for us.
Yeah.
You would argue that is sustainable within the community with profits going back to the community, no?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a good illustration of that is, again, looking at the redlining maps of the 1930s, how it affected Buffalo today, and it's a mirror image. What was redlined in the 30s is challenged today, but there's a big difference. The west side has the same degree of challenge as the east side, but the west side did not suffer the concentrated demolitions that the east side did. So when you go to the west side, it's still densely populated today. It's not a rich neighborhood if we're looking at the far west side, but you're going to still see corner stores, you're going to see these shop houses, and you're going to see people pulling themselves up by the bootstraps because they have the infrastructure still there.
And the presentation you gave on this, is it available online? Can people watch parts of it?
Unfortunately, it's not, but we will be publishing stuff and some of the photographs and everything that we used.
All right. Tim Tielman from the Campaign for Greater Buffalo History, Architecture, and Culture. Thanks for stopping by.
Okay, thank you.
This has been Buffalo What's Next on WBFO and WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown. I'm Dave Debo. Thanks for listening.
This is